I'm Steve Vinson, and you are about to experience the life science effect. Now it's time to go behind the scenes once again to talk to another leader who's out there making it happen. Welcome to the show. We're joined by Dan Robertson, PhD of IBRI. Dan, could you just give us a general overview, your position, your title, what you do here at IBRI, and maybe even a little bit about your personal life?
Excellent. Well, first, thanks for the opportunity to talk with you here. So I am a research fellow here at the Indiana Biosciences Research Institute. I joined IBRI to lead the data sciences group to really work between various data sources, analytics to solve interesting problems. I also have a role of VP of Digital Technology because we have a lot of technology needs in that going forward. So have a very interesting, I think, and diverse background in terms there. If I take a couple minutes in terms of that, have moved around a lot. A lot of what I've done has been, I think, part of my upbringing in terms of this. Born in Canada, East Coast, moved to the West Coast, moved to Australia, even when we were in Canada, did a trip to Nicaragua with the youngest of 8 children. Just very interesting. We moved around a lot. I think that's translated to part of my career as well in terms of working between a lot of different disciplines and always looking for new adventures or new ideas and problems to solve. So my background is physical chemistry, and I've always been in the midst between science and technology. Even from my early days, I learned programming in high school, way back in the dark ages, on a teletype machine with a university computer. I worked on Radio Shack TRS-80 computers, CompuColor, moved up through VAXes, do everything. So I've been seeing the technology revolution, but also with a foot on the scientific side. How do we use that to solve scientific problems? So I have moved as well from both a government lab to academics. I came here to Indiana in '93 to IBRI, Department of Chemistry, had the opportunity to go to Eli Lilly for a 17-year career, and now I've landed at IBRI.
The TRS-80, by the way, was the smartest guy on my floor, and at Rose-Hulman was a big TRS-80 fan.
Okay. Yeah, so we hopefully won't use we used to use the term trash 80.
Trash 80, right.
Is the way we'd say it. Yeah, still amazing in terms of what our compute resources have changed over the course of the last few decades. Just amazing.
Also impressed with the physical chemistry. That was one of the weed out courses, I think. And I have a chemical engineering degree, and PChem was one of the hardest to grasp, I think.
Either PChem or synthetic organic chemistry was the other
organic
one in college.
The weed out course.
Yes.
That's where people decided, well, maybe physics isn't such a bad course to take. So thanks for that overview. Getting into some challenges and opportunities. So tools like Apple's Research Kit for iOS, for people that don't know what that is, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, but also all the other tools that are coming out and making devices really a major component of improving healthcare outcomes. So what is the Applied Data Science Center? How are you taking advantage of these kinds of tools and maybe taking part in some of the potential disruptive nature of the industry right now?
Yeah, so very, very good question, because we've seen technology change. We talked about it in terms of computers changing a lot, and now embedded computers and Fitbits and the wearables is now just amazing in terms of what's happening, miniaturization of technology and otherwise. The challenge is, as these are being developed, that if you have to do an individual interface with each of those devices down to a computer system, very challenging to move forward. So Apple, with the iOS iPhone and Android's doing similar now in terms of this, has built toolkits and platforms to help you integrate rapidly with these devices so they all get centralized so you don't have to worry as much about the connection of the data, but really how do you apply and use it. Been very interesting because these wearables have gone from more of a fitness utility where people have used them for a few weeks and then they go in the drawer. But now we're really seeing the medical devices come into here in terms of the continuous glucose sensing monitor. Apple, I think iPhone just came up with the Apple Watch with some new sensors and technologies in terms of looking at heartbeats and otherwise in terms there. So we know that they're going to absolutely be critical in the transformation of healthcare as we go forward, going from episodic one time at our physician's office for an annual exam to getting continuous data from us. It's already showing utility in terms of Parkinson's or otherwise, in terms of starting to identify issues before they really become potentially even observable from an individual. The challenge, though, is how do you take what are consumer-based products and integrate them, understand the data, understand the variability of the various individuals who are using those. So here at IBRI, as we think about the future of streaming data, of connected devices, of smart data, we think it's absolutely critical, and digital data and collection of continuous streaming digital data is important. So we have started a couple of years ago with the platform, iOS-based platform, using ResearchKit, CareKit, and HealthKit, which are three of the other components of the iOS system that help you to do this, to generate in a platform with a small tech company, Mavensphere LLC, in a project what we call the DigiBiomarkers project. How can we get similar signals from individuals as you would like biomarkers to understand disease state or disease progression? So we made progress with there, and I'm happy to say this year we actually have it in patients where we're actually collecting real data, live data from patients. Two different studies, one of them with IU School of Medicine, one at Stanford Health in Connecticut, so it's not just a regional play. It was actually selected by CTSI, Clinical Translational Sciences Institute, to actually do requests for awards. So that has been out now, where we have physicians at School of Medicine proposing how they can use this type of platform to really drive their research. It really is in the early days in terms of this capability, and there's a lot of research that has to be done to understand both the variability of data received and its really connection to disease state. Been lots of areas where people have tried to move too fast with the technology without really validating it in different environments, under real-world use cases within patients. So we're working forward on that. And actually last month at the Life Sciences Summit, we actually were runner-up on the Inject Tech Challenge Award with this product and with this effort. And so I think on that one, we're very positive that as we go forward, there'll be real opportunities to use this to understand disease research, and at least for IBRI to have a piece of the transformation that we know is coming in healthcare.
Exciting stuff. You know, when we think of tech, and we think of big tech companies like Uber and Amazon and Google, and maybe even some of the smaller players in Silicon Valley that do what you were referring to as consumer technology, you know, getting a minimum viable product out into the marketplace so you can start getting feedback right away, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but early adopters don't really care. They just want the next big thing and the newest thing. But we have a lot of hurdles in life sciences that Dr. Fisher has talked about, and we talked a little bit about on last week's episode. So how do we have a lot of regulatory hurdles. People could be hurt if we put something out there that we tell them will work and it doesn't exactly work because it's too soon. So at the same time, we talk about this disruption that we're ripe for in this industry. So how do you see the nature of how we collaborate in the life science industry changing with all of these different dynamics at play?
It's a great question because when I originally joined IBRI, that was exactly the question I had. What role can IBRI play in this really complex environment? We do have the large life sciences companies because healthcare and life sciences is a very challenging field. With my 17 years of experience, I worked on the discovery side of it, but I saw all that you had to do to take these new innovation from early discovery through all of the trials that you need to do and get it regulatory approval in a way that's safe and efficacious and delivers value to the end patient. And so it was interesting because it's not just the amount of time it takes for innovation, which is sometimes 7 to 10 years on a molecular entity. It's sometimes 3 to 4 years on a medical device. It's very different. So if you think about the tech companies and you're in consumer-based or business-based, you can do things a lot faster. That security, patient health, the HIPAA requirements, the regulatory requirements, put up some real barriers in terms of how do you operate together. So I think absolutely we're right for transformation in the digital side for healthcare. It's actually was shown that even though we're doing electronic medical records, the healthcare system is still lowest utility of digitization. And we do know that there will be players and transformative companies coming up in terms of doing that. But Steve Collins, CEO of Matter in Chicago Innovation, just made a comment at Life Sciences Summit last month that stood out with me. The healthcare system is just a little bit weird. It's very different. So long timelines for sort of the research and validation of the research, the regulatory approvals that are actually needed in terms here. And then you can't discount the complexity of the healthcare system in that the consumers aren't always the one paying for or choosing to pay for theirs. You have multiple players in there. So when you want to try and do some disruption, it becomes more difficult. We think IBRI can play because some of the disruption that comes will happen between organizations. It will happen between access to data or access to the experts in terms of doing that. Now, I do know that Amazon is playing in this space, and we focus on cardiometabolic health, diabetes, obesity. That has huge personal components to it, nutrition, what you do, behavioral, otherwise. So Amazon, I think, interestingly, with the Whole Foods is a nutrition play. You see Google, when we talk about wearable devices, we need to understand the variability of individuals. You may be very different than me. Your baseline may be very different. Historically in healthcare, we've sort of put standards for everyone, but we know we metabolize drugs differently. What we need from a diabetes insulin varies on what we do, activity, or what we eat. So Google's actually doing a project baseline where they're using devices to try and understand what's the baseline and variability of our population. So we can go forward, and who knows what the Amazon, the Buffett and Chase, what they're doing in terms of disrupting healthcare. So I do think we are ripe for disruption. I think it's going to come, but you can't discount that I've lived through a lot of technology and disruption in there, and I've watched it happen with DEC, who used to way back do our vaxes and things for research and commercial use, and they get acquired by a PC manufacturer, right? Who would have thought? Even now that we're doing this podcast, right, our traditional media and print has been disrupted by digital, so we know it's there. I can't predict how it's going to happen, but I do know there are places for multiple organizations to play. And IBRI, where we're working between the interfaces of technology, of academics, where ideas start and research is done, and acting with our life sciences partners, can really potentially play a role in driving some of these type things. And in fact, we've even facilitated meetings here where members of Google's Deep Brain has been here. We've got a collaboration with Virtusa that we're doing, a global company with a local footprint, where Amazon Web Services is actually paying for some of our services. So we are finding a way to sort of play in the interstitial spaces between organizations and disciplines to try and find those opportunities to disrupt.
Creating that bridge. So maybe it's not really, I've been saying how can life sciences collaborate like tech? Maybe it's not like how does life science act like tech? Maybe it's both. How can tech make sure, how can we teach Google in life sciences? How can we teach them how you develop something efficaciously and safely and meet the regulatory requirements and understand reimbursement at the same time that they're teaching us, well, here's how you can maybe innovate more quickly and collaborate more fully.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think it's going to be a both parties sort of disruption happening between various ones. We absolutely know the healthcare and the therapeutic and what we're doing at what we did at Lilly and everything. There has to change. You can't have a 10-year timeline. So everyone knows that how we do things have to change and have to move faster. But how do you do it in a way that is scientifically validated, that you're protecting patients' safety, even as we go into the biotechnology that Ryan will talk about and otherwise, there are opportunities really for disastrous consequences if not handled in a way. And that's very different than us having buyer's remorse because we bought something from Amazon late at night, right? I mean, we can live
or something.
Yeah, we can live with that, right? When the box shows up and said, "Why do I have this thing I bought? I don't even think I need it now." That's very different than the choices we make for the healthcare. I do think that as we go forward, the individual will become more centric to the healthcare system, and they will be more of a central player. How that happens, I don't know yet, but I do think it will absolutely happen.
Fantastic. I often say, when I'm talking to friends or whatever at cocktail parties, I don't think the government will fix healthcare. I think technology and collaboration and innovation will fix healthcare and make it affordable and accessible and make the patient the central focus.
Yeah, I actually think lots of times innovation comes from sort of people that are just dissatisfied with the status quo or who had a bad experience. And I do think it's going to be various components. It's a very complex system. And so I do think you'll start seeing innovation happen in certain regions by potentially even small teams, sometimes small groups of people or individuals just picking off a piece of a problem and saying, can we do it differently? Everyone uses the case, right, that, Uber, largest, transportation company that doesn't own vehicles, right? Airbnb, the largest one that actually doesn't own real estate, largest real estate company that doesn't own it. So the translative property actually tells us the largest healthcare association may be someone who's not even an insurance provider or doesn't own any facilities. But how does it actually help individuals be able to get access to the information they need, the experience they need, the therapeutics, and the guidance they need to improve their health or maintain their health? But I don't know what that looks like. I can't predict. Otherwise, I'd be probably in a different job.
You might be a venture capitalist, just predicting and putting your money there, right?
Yeah, if I could be, there's probably other roles for me.
So making it a little bit local for a second, Indiana is no stranger to big data and being at the forefront of data in places like Indiana Health Information Exchange and Reagan Street. Is the Applied Data Sciences Center an additional player, a bridge builder, or both, or maybe something I didn't think of yet?
I would like to think from my experience that IBRI is a new experiment in how to play within this space. It was created as an industry-led to really help drive innovation. It is not a competitive factor. We do think it is a complementary factor. So as I came to IBRI initially on loan from Lilly and working, I tried to look at the assets we had in the area and leverage those assets to really drive interesting problems. And so been relatively successful doing that. In fact, working with the State Department of Health, we did some project on looking at obesity rates statewide, where we worked with IU Health and we worked with the Indiana Health Information Exchange, one of the best in the nation that we have. One of my biggest projects is actually working with Regenstrief Institute for access to their data to look at type 2 diabetes patients over 20 years, over 800,000 type 2 diabetes patients in there, another 2 million controls. It's that we are working directly with Eli Lilly and Roche Diabetes Care to look at this data and better understand diabetes patients. We actually are looking at sort of how do they respond, how they differentiate between there. We're even doing machine learning predictive models in terms of using that capability. And we've got a paper coming out in a relatively well-known and high-level scientific journal in January, which is a collaboration between multiple parties that sort of look at how do we use this data to understand disease in a different way and really help transform. So we are showing the ability to start doing that. One of the other projects that I just have, we were fortunate to have received a global award for it with the Corteva and Eli Lilly, looking at how do we predict safety of small molecules. Both of them have to do this, one for pharmaceuticals, one for in the environment, EPA, both regulated by different agencies. They're both using similar methodologies. We built this together to a platform to try and drive adoption of these methodologies faster, and it got the award for a best industry collaboration in the Agro 2018 Awards in London last month. So we are showing ability to use both our life sciences, but the data to really drive, potential solutions. Sometimes they're still a little early, but really to drive things a different way between the ecosystem we have, leveraging the academic resources, the tech resources, and the problems that are really important for life sciences companies to solve, but that may be very difficult to solve inside their own walls.
From a leadership perspective, we have a lot of leaders and aspiring leaders that listen to the show. So what drove you to, I don't want to say, I guess I don't want to, I know I wrote this, but I don't want to say leave Big Pharma to come here. But what pulled you to a nonprofit institute setting from a for-profit big pharma setting?
So you walked me into something that I should sort of state that I've always felt in my life and in my career. You always should be running towards something, not away from something, right? Fear is a motivator. If you're running away from something because of fear, you'll get as far as away until you're safe, and then you'll stabilize. If you're really running towards something that you're passionate about, you will keep running to try and reach that goal, and it will keep you sustained. I don't think it's so much leaving a big pharma, a great company like Eli Lilly. I aspired to work at Lilly when I was at the university. In fact, I had applied multiple times without actually getting a job there. But through a connection and a network, I joined Lilly and moved up through the ranks of Lilly. So for me, it was more of a career progression. I lived in academics. I now worked at Lilly. I worked as individual contributor. I moved up the ranks to be head of the computational chemistry and structural biology group. For the past five years before joining IBRI, I was head of research IT globally. Great company, great opportunity, but I was also frustrated with the ability to drive innovation in terms of that. So when I came to IBRI and saw what IBRI was trying to do through its mission to work between these organizations, drive innovation a new way, to me it absolutely seemed like a career progression for me. So the opportunity presented, and I had to basically assess, was it a good opportunity for me? Now I came to IBRI in probably the best situation you could. I was on loan from Eli Lilly. I had all of my same salary and other benefits from there, but I was fully focused on helping IBRI be successful. By the end of that 2 years, when Lilly called me back, I didn't want to leave. I really truly saw that the opportunity was here to do things a different way. The same things I would have to do to drive innovation and drive value inside Lilly, I was doing here just in a very different environment between multiple companies, as we talked about with Corteva, with Roche Diabetes or Diagnostics, with Lilly, with Regenstrief, with IU. The playing field was just so much bigger. So for me, it really was an opportunity to from my career to say, I think it's the best place for me to be. And in fact, when I talked with leaderships about coming here, I honestly felt that maybe I could drive more value for Lilly here than I could actually inside Lilly's walls.
I've heard that before. I've met people who are here now on loan at networking events and things. I've heard people say that before. They feel there's an extreme. I started my career at Lilly, so I have a strong affinity and a loyalty there as well. And I think a lot of people do. And if you work for any big pharma, you see the good they're doing from within the walls. But it's a good point that you could drive more value for Lilly maybe from outside the walls. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I will absolutely just reiterate, it's not so much as leaving Lilly. I thought I'd end my career at Lilly. It's a great company. It was great for my career. It's just that life had a different plan for me, I think.
Right. What would you say to someone starting out, maybe somebody who wants to get in on the excitement and they see we've convinced them that disruption is coming in healthcare and they want to get in on it and they want to get in on the excitement. What kind of advice would you have for them?
I think we were talking about this just a little bit earlier. Just had a group of young doctors here from the Netherlands last month looking at what we're doing in the U.S. and doing differently. And they spent some time here. And so I got to talk with a couple of them who are more interested in the connected devices, the digital, what we're talking about here. One thing I'm envious, right? Someone starting their career now and the innovation we're going to see over the next 10, 20 years, I can't even imagine. The one thing that I did see in my career that happened very rapidly was I thought science moved fast. Technology is moving fast. What it really means is that now we have to continuously learn. We have to be agile. We need to be learning, always learning, not just through reading, but through meeting other people, watching what other people are doing, building networks. So for individuals starting out now, I don't know that I was really progressive or very planful in my career. I think I was very fortunate that when opportunities presented, I went for it. So find an idea, find a passion, find your place in there where you think you can provide value. Now, the other thing starting out, sometimes you're hesitant. You're maybe not as confident. To me, watching over my career, the biggest risk really is to take no risk. So take a little risk. Push your boundaries a little bit. If you feel a little uncomfortable, you're probably doing the right thing. You're getting outside your comfort zone. I've used that as mentoring with people. If you're too comfortable in your position, maybe you need to think about shaking it up a little bit. And then finally, what took me a while to learn was really build your network. Not just within your discipline, but across disciplines. Talk with people who are not in your area, right? Explain what you're doing. Learn to communicate between there. That's when innovation, I think, is really going to happen, is between the interfaces of couple people coming together and doing things. My best work has been in partnership with someone who complemented me.
That's one of the things we'll be talking to the 5th and 8th graders about a little later, is sometimes it's the combination of two seemingly different ideas that really form a huge new innovation. So let's take a short break, and when we come back, I just have one or two more questions, and we'll wrap it up. The Indiana Biosciences Research Institute is connecting the brightest minds and expertise from industry, academia, and the public sector to tackle diabetes, metabolic disease, and poor nutrition. Their motto is Discovery with Purpose, reflecting their commitment to the translation of scientific discovery into improved outcomes for patients here in Indiana and around the world. More at www.indianabiosciences.org. Welcome back. We are still with Dan Robertson. Dan, tell me about a book or books that have had a big impact on your professional life.
Yeah, really interesting thing going back to this. When I grew up, we didn't have much other resources to go, so I read a lot of books. Personally, I like a lot of fantasy books or otherwise. And as odd as it may seem, there is one book that still stands out in terms of a key scene in that book that has influenced me going forward. And it is actually The Blue Adept by Piers Anthony. And the reason for that is there is a scene in there where there's a competition ongoing, a music competition, and it's a duet. The winner of that was actually not the individual that was the most talented musician. It actually was the individual who made the other person better. And so to me, that comes back to a key piece of how, as my career has gone, how do I make other people successful? How do I be part of that partnership? How do I work in the team environment? And so that started from an early day. And then I'll crank through a couple others. Obviously, influential is Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits, right? Another one, as I went up in leadership, was bringing out the best in people. How do you work with people? Very challenging. Physics and math is much easier than people. So bringing out the best in people as I continued up my career, Getting Things Done by David Allen. How do you be productive in terms there? And then as you work in collaborations, from the younger Covey, The Speed of Trust. How do you build that trust to drive collaborations? And then just because of watching what happens in my career and everything, I can't not say about Fooled by Randomness and Anti-Fragility by Nassim Taleb. Very critical in how I think about problems and how I think about solutions, and how there's serendipity, there's randomness, there's environment, and all these other factors that come to bear really to make the outcomes possible, or the outcomes that we see. And after the fact, it's always easy to try and understand it, but when we're looking into the void of the future, there are so many possibilities that we don't know what the right thing is, and it's probability and otherwise in terms of what we see exhibit. So most of those have changed, and as I've gone through my career and helped influence me as I've continued. So
that's a great list, and maybe a good New Year's resolution would be for somebody to get through every one of those. Would you just say them one more time? Just so in case somebody was listening, they got their pen out. Now they have their pen ready to go.
So Blue Adept by Piers Anthony. If you like fantasy, Piers Anthony, I loved a lot of his books. 7 Habits of Highly Successful People by Stephen Covey. Bringing Out the Best in People by Alan Loy McGinnis. Getting Things Done by David Allen. Speed of Trust, Stephen Covey, but it's, I think, a different middle initial that I don't remember. Fooled by Randomness, Anti-Fragility, Nassim Taleb. He also did the Black Swan, but I actually think the Fooled by Randomness is a good book, and Anti-Fragility is sort of him capping off all of those things. Provocative read. So many people may not like a couple of those choices.
I was earlier in my career, I struggled actually with organizing my time and organizing myself. So somebody said, you got to read Getting Things Done.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like I'm making this up. I still have the book. I still have not read it. I'll bet if I read it, there'd be advice in there how to.
Well, you probably have. It would probably just reinforce how you get things done,
right?
In terms of how they've done. Yeah. What I have found is they give a lot of good tricks, but ultimately we individually have to figure out what works for ourselves. It's all substrate for us to use to know what works best for ourselves.
Well, this has been great, Dan. where can listeners go? I mean, you've given so much rich information. I think people are going to want to follow you in your career, but more importantly, probably IBRI and in the ADSC. Where can they go to?
So what I would say is everything is changing fast. Obviously, we've got news and efforts ongoing, and we're changing relatively rapidly. So absolutely visit the IBRI website and look at the news and look at the teams we have set up there for the IBRI as it grows. I always am looking at the IBJ in terms of updates and news, or Inside Indiana Business in terms of looking at that. I actually use news aggregators as well for areas of interest. And then if it's within the mobile side or the health side, lots of times I'll be monitoring Fierce Health IT. There's a Data Zone Daily Digest or mHealth Intelligence. And then personally, if you're interested, then I'd say, yes, monitor the IBRI website, look at the 16 Tech, what's going to be happening here in the Innovation District as you go. And then for me personally, LinkedIn is a great way to connect to me and see where it's at. All I just request is please give me some context on LinkedIn. I get a lot of people coming back out. And my email address is drobertson@indianabiosciences.org. And our website is indianabiosciences.org.
Fantastic. Lots of information, lots of insights. I really appreciate it. I wish we weren't out of time.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you. You have just experienced the Life Science Effect. If you liked it, be sure and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And more importantly, tell your colleagues, tell your boss, tell your friends. It'll make you look smart, and maybe it'll even get you a raise. Thanks again to our presenting sponsor, BPM Associates. Set your medical innovations in motion. BPM helps life science companies design, manage, and execute their most complex projects. What effect will you cause? Thanks to today's guest and to all of our guests. Who else should I be talking to? Send me an email at steven.vincent@bpm-associates.com. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, and go make something amazing happen.